So your pension money is no longer about saving for your retirement. Under a new Mansion House agreement, the top pension providers are being pressurised to pump billions of pounds into UK Plc, and 10% of your pension money must go to illiquid, high-risk firms that you've probably never heard of. So what that means is your hard-earned pension contributions just got pulled into a high-stakes gamble. So is this a bold move to back Britain? Or is it a very dangerous financial experiment with your retirement on the line? Is your pension money going to be used to grow the UK economy and do the government's work for them? So in this week's video, I'm going to take a look at these significant changes that you didn't ask for and you didn't even vote for. Hi, my name's Simon and I'm a chartered financial planner, and I've helped hundreds of families plan ahead for their future with confidence by keeping more of what they've earned. Now, this video is going to be explosive, so follow me downstairs. In a quiet but a seismic move, 17 of UK's largest pension providers, managing about 90% of our pension wealth, have signed a pact under the Mansion House reforms to invest 10% of their default funds into private markets, of which 5% must be invested in the UK. So on the surface, this looks like a bold initiative to supercharge economic growth, but underneath it's a very draconian and a dystopian shift that threatens to commandeer your retirement savings for the government's own economic agenda. This isn't now just about investment policy. It's coercion, but it's being dressed up in the language of patriotism and UK growth. So private markets include unlisted companies, private equity, infrastructure projects, venture capital startups, building projects, and green energy chasing net zero targets. So do any of these investments mean anything to you whatsoever? Now, these investments don't trade on public stock exchanges, and these assets are highly illiquid, meaning you can't sell them easily. They're also going to be high risk, and often they're just crossing their fingers and hoping for long-term growth, but clearly with no guarantee of success. And they also lack the transparency of the stock market. And yet, under these reforms, it's your pension that's going to be pushed headfirst into this very opaque and very murky investment world. Now, the government just sees your pension money as their financial lifeline and a way to unlock economic growth, but without raising taxes, borrowing yet even more money, or cutting services like the NHS. But let's be clear, if these markets were genuinely suitable for retirement portfolios, the pension funds and their managers would already be investing in them. Now, the current exposure to these private markets in the UK is a mere 2.54%, and 2/3 of pension providers have got no private market exposure whatsoever. Now, that's not a coincidence. Now, your pension funds, such as your default workplace pension, are being bulldozed and strong-armed to invest in these assets. Now, the Mansion House agreement has been sold as a voluntary commitment, but if you look closer, the political pressure becomes immediately obvious. Now, pension providers are facing implicit threat: play ball or face regulatory or even legal intervention. And it's all there in black and white. Article 4 of the Mansion House Compact gives the government reserve powers to enforce these investment mandates if providers don't comply. So let me just say that again. The government can bring in reserve powers to force these investment decisions if your pension provider doesn't comply. That means if these pension providers don't invest enough money of your money into private markets and UK growth assets, the government can then just step in and force them to. Now, I might be a little bit old-fashioned, but that is not investment freedom. But the message is very, very clear. Invest how we say, or we'll make you. Now, the government's goal is to mobilise about £50 billion into private markets by 2030. That's in just 5 years' time. And that includes £25 billion a year into UK-based assets. This is a massive bet on the idea that funneling your pension money into risky, long-term projects will stimulate UK growth. But here's a problem. The state is setting the economic growth targets and then using your pension to hit them. And you cannot make this up. The government's even going to provide the pension providers with a long list of their preferred investment projects. Now, this is a fundamental shift. Pensions are no longer about maximizing the returns for savers. They're being repurposed to meet national objectives like economic growth, infrastructure development, and building a political legacy. Now, this is a violation, in my opinion, of your investment independence, and that is just plain and simple. So investment decisions that were traditionally guided by risk-adjusted returns, but in your best interest, are now being dictated to by political priorities. So if you're finding value in this video, even though there might be some steam now coming out of your ears, and you might even be shouting at the screen, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. So should the government force how you invest your money, or should you be left alone to make your own financial decisions for your future? Is this a step too far? Well, let me know in the comments. Now, let's not pretend that the UK infrastructure track record is a shining beacon, a shining example of global efficiency. From HS2 to delays building hospitals, PPE, smart motorways, the UK's recent infrastructure record has been a catalogue of mistakes, from overrunning timelines, being over budget, administrative nightmares, and ultimately that's meant diluting and dialing down ambitions or even cancelling the projects. So who of you remembers the £100 million extra cost of diverting HS2 to protect that Batcave? And yet, this is exactly where some of your pension money is now being directed, with the government effectively mandating providers into high risk and national projects. Now, pensions were supposed to fund our retirement, not to plug a 60 billion government funding shortfall before the next budget. Now, this is a figure that's been recently highlighted by the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, and that's the projected deficit in the UK's balance sheet before April 2026. So please look out for more tax rises that are coming your way. So amongst the providers that did agree to this monumental shift, one notable name refused to sign the agreement, and that was Scottish Widows, as they called it a step too far. And that simple phrase encapsulates the growing discomfort within the financial community. So whilst the government hails this as visionary, insiders are going to see it for what it actually is, and that's unprecedented government and financial overreach. Now, this dissent from Scottish Widows is critical, as it signals that not all industry leaders are willing to quietly hand over the keys to their members and their pensioners' future in exchange for some sort of political favour. And if you're interested, here's a list of the 17 providers who signed the Mansion House Accord. We've got Aegon, Aon, Aviva, Legal & General, LifeSight, M&G, Mercer, Cushion from the NatWest, Nest, Now Pensions, the Phoenix Group, Royal London, the Smart Pension, the People's Pension, TPT Retirement Solutions, and the University's Superannuation Scheme. Now, these 17 providers control about 90% of the UK's defined contribution pension market, and that covers tens of millions of savers. Now, they've all pledged to channel billions of pounds into private as well as domestic markets, and that's going to be aligned to government growth targets, but not according to the level of risk that you might be comfortable with. Now, the top 22 pension providers already contribute about £280 billion into the UK economy. Now, the government may be calling this unlocking capital, but from where the pensioners stand and the savers stand, it looks like they're commandeering your pension money. Now, from here, that looks like a dangerous precedent is forming. The more the government fails to deliver on their economic growth promises, there's going to be more pressure going to be placed on private companies as well as us to bail them out. Now, if private markets were truly the answer for all of us to have a more comfortable retirement, they wouldn't need the government muscle to attract yet more new pension money. But here's the reality. These investments are high risk, illiquid, opaque, and unproven as assets that are appropriate to save for our retirement. And yet now these assets are being forced into our retirement portfolios by government policy. And not because they're good for pensioners or for savers or the members of the scheme, but because they're good for the headlines, the GDP figures, and more importantly, political gain. Now, whatever you believe in this or whatever your political stripes may be, this is economic engineering at the expense of your independent financial choices. Now, I have spent a lot of time reading through the financial press, and no one's asking the very hard question. What happens if these high-risk investments fail? If a startup funded by your pension then collapses, who becomes accountable? If a UK infrastructure project goes wildly over budget or undelivers, again, what protections are in place for you for your retirement? And the uncomfortable answer for all of that is there are none. And that might be because this isn't about you or me anymore. It's about the government's economic narrative. Now, your pension has now just become a political tool, and in the process, you've lost control of some of your financial future. Now, this mansion house reform represents more than a shift in investment strategy. Now, pensions were designed to serve you, the member of the scheme, and now part of it, at least, is now serving the state. So what's next? Mandated sustainable investments? Climate-directed investments? Certain sectors favoured by government ministers? Now, we're all told by the government, as well as the FCA for that matter, that too many of us have got too much cash and we need to invest in the stock market. And for those who are already invested in the stock market, we're now told to invest in unlimited companies as well. So at each stage, we're told to take more and more and more investment risk. And believe me, that needs to stop. Now, the erosion of our financial freedom often starts very slowly with voluntary agreements and patriotic packaging. And then they gain momentum and then they're lost quickly and then surprisingly all at once. But make no mistake, this is a slippery slope and we're already careering and heading halfway down it. Just to be clear, I'm not opposing potential growth in the UK, but what I am opposing is financial coercion. And all this video is about your right to make your choices for your future with your money and not to be interfered with by government. Now, is that just too much to ask? Now, the Mansion House reforms may seem like progress, but it's a lot more sinister as your choices are quietly being erased and the government's going to be gambling with your future. And that for me, and I would imagine for many, is a step too far. But before you do get to your state pension age, you're going to need to know some of the biggest lies that I've been told about the state pension and why, despite having 35 years national insurance contributions, that's no guarantee that you're going to get the maximum state pension. So thank you so much for watching to the very end. Thank you for your time and for your patience as always. I'm going to see you all again next week.